Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, I am joined by my special guest co-host, Quentin Williams, founder and CEO of Dedication to Community. Together, we interview Dave Alpern, President Gibbs Racing. Dave was born in Frankfurt, Germany, the son of a high-ranking CIA official. When arriving in the States at just 2 years old, his family landed in Northern Virginia. His plans to pursue an MBA were put on hold when he was offered an internship at the then startup NASCAR team owned by Coach Gibbs. We talk about when the who you are working for is greater than what you are doing. Dave has since held every position in the company's front office. As one of the longest tenured executives in the sport, Dave has worked with senior executives and CEOs of many of the country's largest companies. He has been invited to the White House multiple times after winning NASCAR championships. He is also the author of the book, Taking the Lead, Winning Business Principles That Fuel Gibbs Racing. In this interview, Dave touches on dealing with Tshirt syndrome. We also discuss experiencing some imposter syndrome as he continues to remember how it all started. An intern working out of a closet as an office without even an outlet for a light or a phone. Listen in to hear how Dave went from unpaid intern to Tshirt guy to president of Gibbs Racing. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel, stream this podcast on all streaming sites, comment, like, and share, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day, Live It. The views expressed by all Today's the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and as I've been saying for over a year now, every week I get to interview the most incredible humans who are doing great work around the world. And today I have two of them, which I'm so excited because I have Quentin Williams back with me co-hosting. Hi, Q. How are you?
Hi, Jody. Hello. Good to be here.
Ooh. I'm so happy you're here. So Q, for those who may not have watched, but I'm going to send you back next to last year to watch his interview as well. But Q is the founder and CEO of Dedication to Community. He is a former FBI agent, a former NFL and NBA executive, and the list goes on, right, Q? There's more added to that. Those are just some key points.
But we're here to talk about Dave.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to Dave too, but I want to introduce you too. But now, yes, and absolutely, Q, we are going to talk about Dave. So Dave Alpern, how are you today?
Well, I'm great. I feel doubly blessed that I'm not only getting to be on your show, but I'm also getting to spend some time with my buddy Q. So yeah, and you never want to be introduced after Q, after his bio. You're like, good grief. Hi, my name's Dave. That's all you need to say. Don't just stop. But anyway, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm going to halt here. And I always do this. I read from the bios because I really believe that what it takes to get the words on the page is so important. So I never try to memorize them. So I'm just going to read a little bit about Dave. Was named president of Gibbs Racing, JGR, in 2016. He joined the team in 1993 as a project intern and has seen the team grow from 18 employees to more than 500. During his tenure, Dave has held almost every position in the company's front office, from sponsorships and branding to PR and social media, most recently serving as chief marketing officer. Dave spends a great deal of his time working with the counterparts of the various race teams, tracks, and TV networks in growing and enhancing the sport of NASCAR. And the list goes on and on with your bio. But I can't wait to have the conversation because I've gotten to learn a little bit more about you behind the scenes, and now we'll get to share more of that with our audience. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Again, I'm looking forward to it. Let's get started. Thanks for having me.
Let's get started. That's right. So Dave, I always ask the same question to everybody. Tell us about where you grew up and what kind of child you were when you were young.
So I grew up outside of the nation's capital in Northern Virginia, outside of DC. I had two older sisters, so I was the baby and the only boy. And I was a rule follower. I was a pretty good kid. I had a little bit of an interesting background in that my father, I was actually born in Frankfurt, Germany. I have a sister that was born in Bangkok, Thailand. My father was actually a CIA operative. And so we were stationed in the US. He moved around. Again, I was born in the US Army Hospital in Frankfurt, Germany, moved back to the States when I was 2. And so I remember my dad being gone a lot. And I mean, really, my dad was a spy. I didn't know where he worked until I was 16, and he retired and started his own. He was an electrical engineer in the CIA. And so he started an engineering firm and kind of told me at that point, I was in high school, where he had worked. And I kind of went, oh, well, that explains a lot. So my parents divorced when I was 8, which I was young enough that I don't remember being traumatized. I remember it just being, that was just normal to me. It meant I had 2 Christmases. I had to go to 2 different places on Christmas. And my sisters kind of sheltered me from a lot. And so, yeah, I honestly, I guess maybe as I think back, it was a little bit unusual, but to me, it wasn't. It was very normal. I also had, in 5th or 6th grade, I was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. And Tourette is it's a neurological disorder that, causes you to have different tics, vocal tics, facial twitches. And so again, as I think of my childhood, that is a big part of my memory, because obviously going into, middle school and high school with tics. And on top of that, I was a late bloomer. So I actually entered a high school of 3,000 people up in the nation's capital as the smallest kid in school. I was about 5 feet tall, 80 pounds, and, I had these different twitches and stuff. And so all that to say, I don't remember being that bullied. I remember I think it made me a little bit mentally tough, just because I just had to deal with that. And I kind of developed a little bit of a sense of humor and learned to kind of laugh at it and myself. And so, it's probably a long answer, but all those things kind of shaped really who I am now, whether it was having sisters and being able to deal with a little bit of a disability and dealing with parents' divorce, and all things that, many of your listeners probably had in one form or another. And that's just kind of became a part of who I am today. But again, felt very loved, despite a little bit of a, dysfunctional, non-traditional upbringing. But anyway, lived up there, went to college in Northern Virginia. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about it, but met my, soulmate in college when she was 17 and I was 18. And we've now been married for 27 years, but all of that is part of my story. And again, I often talk to students. I actually got into my 4th choice of college, and my first year of college was the worst year of my life. I felt like a failure. I was an electrical engineering major because I figured my dad's an electrical engineer. I'm good at math. I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. They didn't really do personality profiles back then, which would have told me I'd be a horrible engineer. So I went to a college and was, not a great student. None of my friends were there. And I thought, and my goal in life was to make my dad proud of me. And I thought, I'm such a failure. Here I am at, and so it really started off poorly. But again, sometimes the way God works is I was being prepared for something that I never imagined. In my summer before my sophomore year, I met my wife and at this school, and by staying near home at this college, which wasn't my first choice, I got to be mentored by a guy named Rick, who we'll talk about more, who greatly impacted my life. And had I gone off to college, I wouldn't have lived 5 miles from him and been able to be mentored, which really shaped my life. 2 of my best friends ended up transferring back to this college our junior and senior year, and we lived together. All that to say, even that ended up being one of the greatest experiences of my life, but it didn't start the way I would have scripted, as many things in life don't. My childhood probably wouldn't have scripted it that way, but I wouldn't change it. College started in a way, wouldn't have scripted, but wouldn't change it. And then as we talk about my career, that clearly did not start the way that I scripted, but wouldn't change any of it. So that's a little bit about me and my background.
There's so much to go with Cutie. I want to ask
Yes.
before I get to my next question.
Yeah, the challenges that you went through. So people look at you now, you're the president of Joe Gibbs Racing. You're the president of the #1 NASCAR team in the world. And yet you started out with all these challenges. So the prejudgment sometimes is he had it made from the beginning. Golden spoon. He's, you know, he didn't really have many challenges. So when you tell people your story, what is the response that you get?
You know, Hugh, I appreciate you asking that, and you know, it varies, but generally, and one of the reasons I just enjoy sharing my story is there's always a part of it that resonates with someone. And you know, when I think of one of my, you know, guys I admire more than anybody, it's Coach Gibbs, and I work for a two-sport Hall of Famer. But often when Coach would speak, one of the things I would think was, there's not a ton of his story that I can relate to because he's so far above anything I could ever imagine. He was so gifted and talented in his area. Often my story resonates with most people because I really am sort of an average person in many ways. Like there's nothing you would see about Dave that you'd say, well, I can't achieve that, because you can. And so I think that's one of the things that I think people respond to is, again, some of the things that I just talked about. Hey, I can relate to parents being divorced. I can relate to having a physical, somewhat of a disability or a challenge. You know, I can relate to feeling like a failure. I can relate to not living up to my parents' expectations, and to having dreams that I want in my life, and my career not starting anything like that and feeling like a complete failure. So there's so many things in my life that somebody can cling on to, and hopefully that gives them a little bit of hope in their own life. So again, that's one of the reasons I appreciate. I really never, until I wrote my book, I rarely talked about having Tourette. Not because I was ashamed of it. I just kind of didn't think about it. Didn't think it would really matter to anybody. And the minute I started talking about it, I have people, hey, my child has it, or I have it, or how do you do this, or this? And so that kind of opened my eyes to, wow, I need to talk about that more. I'm not ashamed of it at all. I need to talk about it because maybe there's a parent. It's amazing how many parents of kids don't understand it. I know mine didn't, and it frustrated me because I tried to explain it. So parents of children with it will come to me and say, can you answer questions? How do I do this, or this? Or do you mean my child can actually have a normal life and a great career dealing with people? And it gives them hope. And so hopefully a lot of my story is something that just resonates with people.
You know, I think though, I'm sorry. Hugh, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to note that's the power of vulnerability. That's what it does for society. It's not about us. It's about society and what you can do for other people, because you're good with it, but others are struggling, and that struggle can change, can shift pretty quickly when they hear that somebody like yourself has overcome it and is very successful in living a dream.
Agreed.
And Dave, I think too, as though, you know, people look at you now and they say, wow, you know, this is incredible, all of his accomplishments. How could I ever get there? Like I don't see that road. And so what advice, I think it's really important for someone like yourself who has been down that road, what advice would you give to someone who really doesn't even know where to begin? It's not feeling good about themselves right now.
Yeah, gosh, there's so much to unpack there. I talk a lot, talk about that I wrote a book. And one of the reasons I did was to answer the question that you just asked is what do I do? And there's so many things, but a lot of it starts with yourself. It starts with, I always talk about delivering more value than you cost. And so whatever stage of life you're in, when I was an unpaid intern, there's a really low bar for delivering more than you cost. You know, the way I saw it was, even if I was a complete failure, at least it was like a tie, because they didn't lose anything. You know, it's like, maybe I didn't give them anything. So it starts with things that you control. Like I said before, I don't view myself as the best really at anything. I'm not the best at math. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the whatever. So when you wake up every morning, you think, well, what are the things that I do control? I control my attitude. I control the way that I treat people. I control, I control the contributions that I'm making, whether I'm a student, whether I have a part-time job, whether I'm an unpaid intern. How can I be that person that I talk about becoming indispensable? How do I make myself indispensable to the group around me? And again, whether it's being great at little things, whether it's never saying that's my job, whether it's being a fountain versus a drain, and we can unpack each one of those. We'll talk we'll talk about the fountains and drains as an example. That's a small choice you make every day. And I always tell people that there are really two types of folks. I have a glass window by my office, and I get about a 2-second warning before people walk to my door. And I say that there are really two types of people. There's the person who, when I see them go by the window, I kind of exhale a little bit and go, this is going to be a struggle, because I know that this person's probably going to come identify a problem without a solution. They're going to complain. They may gossip, and it's going to drain me for the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Then there's the fountains that walk by. And those are the people that make me stand up before they get to the door. If Q walked by my glass window, that's what I would do. I would stand up, because I know this is a person who's going to breathe life into the interaction we're about to have. Doesn't mean they're bringing good news or they're blowing sunshine, but they're coming to roll their sleeves up and go, hey, we got a problem, but I'm in it with you. I'm about to come up with a solution, or I'm going to add value to this conversation. And so again, early on, I thought I'm not going to be a drain. That's a choice that I'm going to make with every interaction. I want to be that guy that they say, we need to get Dave in here, because he's going to add value to this conversation. He's going to breathe life into this situation, whether it's a crisis or it's a decision that needs to be made. So all that to say, whatever stage you're in, the way I would encourage people is it often doesn't go at the pace we want it to go. It always doesn't go the path. I talk about life being a book, and there are pages. There are sometimes entire chapters that just stink. There's no way to, and if we could just flip to the end and see how stuff turns out, it would be so much easier, but we can't do that. So often all we can control is, hey, control what you can control. And so that for me early on, again, as a person that wasn't the most gifted at anything, what are the things I can control today to make myself indispensable, to add value in my career? And this also applies to your personal life. And again, as we go on, we can talk about some other things like understanding your why, like, why am I doing life? And again, for me, I think that was something that I discovered in high school, my faith that has been a big part of my why, where it was a matter of trusting that, okay, there was somebody who wrote my book of life and it wasn't me. And so I have to trust what the next chapter is. All I'm going to do is control today what I can control. And so again, there's a lot to unpack there, but that's a little bit about kind of to answer that.
Dave, you're speaking like my language, I have to tell you, because today is the day is obviously the name. You said that, like,
absolutely. Today is the day.
Today is the day. And also, you're talking about really allowing the steps to happen and listening and being intuitive to what's happening in your life. And I think it's just so important that people understand that you're not going to have all the answers. It's going to take time and it unravels. So I just want to talk about taking the lead, because that's the name of your book. And since you've mentioned your book a few times, I want to make sure that you talk about that. So taking the lead, you wrote this book and you explained a little bit about it. Where can people find it? There it is. I'm holding it up for those who are on YouTube. You can.
Yeah, you can. I mean, obviously the easiest way is click on Amazon and check it out. And all of my author proceeds, by the way, are donated to what's called the JD Gibbs Legacy Fund. And we can talk about that. JD was my best friend. He was the president of JGR. He passed away. He's the son and of the owner, Joe Gibbs. And I took his job when he passed away, which is very difficult. But JD's Legacy Fund actually 100% funds a ministry that was near and dear to JD and to myself called Young Life. And Young Life basically sends mentors, Christian mentors into the lives of adolescents, middle school and high school kids, and specifically Urban Young Life, which basically sends those mentors into some of the under-resourced high schools here in the Charlotte area that wouldn't otherwise have Young Life if it wasn't being funded in this way. Young Life really transformed my life, and JD always felt it was important that kids at every high school, regardless of what community they grew up in, should have a mentor walk into their life, as we did, and I mentioned him earlier, Rick, walk into our lives. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about. So you pick it up on Amazon or your favorite bookstore, but it was just, again, the idea of aggregating all these things I've learned. Number one, I've had a front row seat. I've actually, over the last 30 years, probably spent more time with Joe Gibbs than anyone has. I sit next to him on the plane. My office is right next to him. So I've gotten to have a front row seat, I've been embedded for this MBA program from a two-sport Hall of Famer for my whole career. So I wanted to share the nuggets of wisdom that I learned. And at the same time, really, I wanted to share my story of going from an unpaid intern to being the president and the things that I learned along the way. And then again, that I really wasn't this dynamic, uber gifted leader. It just was going through the process, going, one day at a time. And again, the outcome that I had isn't the same outcome for everybody. And that's okay too. A successful path doesn't mean you're the president of a pro sports team. It can look like whatever it is supposed to look like in your life. And that's okay too. And I really wanted to write a book for all those reasons. And more than anything, this book is really kind of my legacy I have 3 boys, and I really wanted to just write a book so that they would know of God's faithfulness to this company, to this crazy story of me and my journey. And I had no idea it would end up getting published and that others would get to enjoy it and be encouraged by it as well. I'm glad they did, because it was a lot of work. So had I just written it for those 3, it would have been worth it. But I'm glad that others besides my boys are being encouraged by it as well.
It's incredible. It's an incredible journey, really. And you mentioned, flipping the chapters of a book and getting to the end so you could know the outcome. That we all know those people who want to just get to the end. They're not really enjoying the journey, and they figure out late in life that that's probably what they should have done. You had a journey that started out professionally. We talked about having Tourette's, from a young kid, having to deal with challenges, and probably along with those challenges came some pain. I'm sure some pain. But as a professional, when you graduate college, now your profession is based in relationships. Absolutely. No doubt. You can talk about that with JD. But even with that relationship, that strong relationship, you started out in the closet. in a closet with electricity and a phone being piped. There were like extension cords and stuff, because you didn't even have electricity in the closet. Could you talk about how you started out literally in like a closet with a desk and a chair?
I did. And so you can paint this picture. So here I had long since changed my major, realized I'm not going to be an electrical engineer. I switched to communications with the hopes of being a broadcast journalist. Clearly, I failed at that as well. So I graduate college, and it's funny, I speak to students now, and I mean, they've got plans and these internships, and I always speak to them and go, you are so far ahead of where I was, because I graduated and had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. I worked in a mall for a couple of months, living in my parents' house, trying to figure out what am I going to do. And again, I had an opportunity because of a friendship, which again, I'm always grateful that I got the opportunity. Then I had to earn it. And JD Gibbs had a lot of friends and could have picked anybody, but he picked me when they needed a gopher. Again, it wasn't for a glamorous job, it was a gopher. But I remember asking JD later in life, why did you pick me? And he said, because I knew I could count on you. And so in many ways, that's an example of, I was auditioning for a job. Even in my personal friendship, you don't realize that the people are watching you. People are looking for patterns in your life. Are you dependable? Can they count on you? Are you lazy, or are you going to hustle? And so again, that was an audition. JD picked me. Now, what he picked me for wasn't very glamorous. They needed, again, a person to do a little bit of nothing. It was really a little bit of everything, but there was no job description. So yeah, I show up in Charlotte, and I'm dating my wife at the time. And I remember telling my parents, her, hey, I'm moving to Charlotte. I'm going to work in a garage. By the way, they can't pay me for the first few months, but I just have a hunch, hey, it's Joe Gibbs. Everything he touches turns to gold. It'll look great on my resume, and then I'll go do what I'm going to do for a living. So I moved to Charlotte, sight unseen. As Q mentioned, nowhere to put me. They empty out a broom closet. They put a little elementary school desk in the broom closet. There's no electrical outlets in a broom closet, so they run an extension cord with a lamp. And this is early 90s, so there's no internet. I have no computer. I have a spiral notebook. I have a phone with a long cord running out into the hall, and absolutely nobody to call. Who am I going to call? I don't know anybody. I don't know what I'm doing. there's no employee handbook. We have 15 people, and other than me and JD, they all work on race cars. So we're the only non-mechanics, which by the way, already gives you, they called us carpet walkers. We're the ones that live in the front and, stay out of our way. They already didn't respect us. They called us the college pukes. There was all kinds of nicknames. So you go in there with a complex already. And when someone asks, so by the way, what do? You're like, you got to make up something, because the answer is, I have no idea. And honestly, that's how it started. And it would have been easy to just hide in the broom closet and stay out of the way. But I figured out early on, there was one thing I knew for sure. I really loved and respected Joe and JD. And I thought the who was more important than the what. And I think that's an important lesson in life and in a career. Who I was doing this for and with was way more important than what I was doing. I've joked, we could have been selling coat hangers and it really wouldn't have mattered, because who I was doing it with. I was getting to work for a guy that was really my hero, who was a man living out his faith, but was great at what he did, and with my best friend. So I wanted to stay around. And that's when I decided I have got to create value. I have got to be that person that they say, not only do we eventually want to pay him, but we can't afford to get rid of him. So I started honestly doing anything. One example I give, and this is a good one sometimes for people earlier in their career. When email started becoming a thing, a lot of the guys in the shop weren't the greatest writers in the world. So if they'd have an email to send to a NASCAR or to a sponsor, they'd come in my office and go, can you write an email for me? Well, it would have been easy for me to say, don't you know I went to college and my job is not to write emails for a mechanic to send? But I'd say, absolutely, I'll help you. So I started helping people write their emails. Well, before long, one of the drivers, Bobby Labonte, who's now in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, came in and asked his crew chief, hey, I've got to give my speech at the end of the year awards banquet. Can you help me write my speech? Well, the crew chief goes, well, I can't, but Dave is a pretty good writer. Why don't you go in Dave's office and have Dave help you write your speech? So here I am, a 20-something-year-old writing a speech that gets read on national TV by a driver. Well, that led to the driver kind of coming and sitting in my little broom closet whenever he was in the office, just catching up, getting advice. And I started sharing things with him and giving him my opinion or giving him advice. And so he began to rely on me. Well, before long, I kind of became the unofficial liaison between team ownership and our driver. And I went to the owner, I went to Coach, and I said, hey, the driver really trusts me and he talks to me quite a bit. What if I just started going to lunch with him once a month? He said, absolutely. I think you should officially take on that role. Well, I share that long story to say something I would explain to students. Had I gone into Coach months earlier and said, hey, by the way, I think I should be the driver liaison, he would have said, go back to your broom closet. What are you talking about? You have not earned that. But because I didn't say that wasn't my job, because I was really good at a little thing led to a bigger thing, which led to a bigger thing. And then all of a sudden I was in this role that I never would have gotten had I not earned it, one small bit at a time. Had you asked me a year ago, I would have never told you, hey, writing these emails is going to lead to being a liaison for the driver. But again, as Q said, our business is relationships, and it won me the right to build a relationship. And so there were 100 examples of that over the years that led to me creating a position that now had enough value to the company where they said, Dave, we'd like you to stay around. Again, maybe one other quick one. I became the T-shirt guy. That was my nickname for many years. And that was literally born out of Coach was still the coach of the Washington, the then Redskins up in RFK. And he was going back and forth between Washington and Charlotte. And I thought, we ought to sell shirts that say Joe Gibbs Racing on them in the stadium where the football team plays. Keep in mind, there was no internet to research how to make a T-shirt. I figured it out. I figured out how to make T-shirts. I figured out the name of the person who bought the items that went in RFK Stadium. I went and had a meeting with the guy. I said, hey, by the way, I'm here on behalf of Coach Gibbs. Coach Gibbs, for the record, had no idea that I was having this meeting. I told him, I brought him a sample of a shirt that, again, took me months to figure out how to make. He said, I'll take 72 of them, but I'm only going to take them on consignment, which basically meant if we don't sell them, I'll give them back to you. I went back to the office and told JD, I failed to tell him the part about, hey, by the way, we've got to buy them back. And all of a sudden, and by the way, he said, send me a PO. And I was like, you got it. And I left having no idea what a PO was. I didn't realize that meant purchase order. Long story short, first game, all 72 t-shirts sold, and we were in the t-shirt business. And now all of a sudden I had to become the t-shirt expert. And I flew to New York and met with Q. You may have been there at the time. I met with NFL Properties, and I started learning how to do this. How does licensing work? And I became the merchandise expert for JGR and started doing it for our drivers. No one asked me to do it. No one taught me to do it. I just knew there was a niche and there was there was a need for that. So I thought, I'm going to be that guy. And so for 10 years of my career, I was the t-shirt guy. And again, one building block in going from unpaid intern to president, understood that not everybody has the opportunity at their company to do that exact type of thing, but it's just an example of, again, a step I took that said, not the smartest, don't really have any knowledge, but I can gain knowledge. I can learn something that no one else here knows how to do to create value for the company.
It's an unbelievable drive, right? You're stepping out of your comfort zone left and right, building the opportunity for yourself to continue to become more and more valuable. Pam 10 is a leader in IT enterprise solutions and staffing. They are driven to transform their clients' business performances. They do this every day by providing their clients with the best services and products like BizLego, an online community platform, and Colear, a unique learning management system. They also transform the lives of women and children through their associated nonprofits, SheTech, which supports women in and joining the technology field, and Softkin, support organization for kids in need. Pam 10, technology for social good. Go to pam10.com for more information. You know, you say something that I wrote down is when the who is greater than the what, because I always say when the why is greater than the how. But I loved that take a leap. I love that when the who is greater than the what, because I understand exactly what that means as well. It's like who you're working with and what you're doing and who you're doing that for is greater than what you're doing. You want to make that other person proud. And you started out saying about making your dad proud. And I kind of feel, tell me if I'm wrong on this, just an intuitive thing that hit me is that you almost wanted to make Coach proud too.
Oh, no. Well, when JD said, I knew I could count on you. Well, what's a person's reaction to that going to be? Well, darn it, you are going to count on me. I am not going to let you down. And again, Coach, you don't want to let down people that you admire, people that you look up to. So much of this was I wanted to validate JD's choice so that his dad would say, JD, you did good. You picked, as opposed to who's this numbnut in the broom closet that's taking up oxygen in here. So no, absolutely. And I think, many of these men that I admired in my life, my dad, my dad passed away 11 years ago, but he never got to see me become the president of JGR, but he definitely was able to tell me he was proud of me, and he loved my job, and he loved, he would come to some races and he just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And there's some neat stories we can unpack here if we have time about my dad and sort of towards the end of his life. But no, you're absolutely right. A lot of what drives me is not wanting to let those I love down. And that drives many people. And so, yeah, that's definitely a motivator for me.
The other thing I just wanted to mention to you, I know you probably have a question here, is that also there's such an important thing about making yourself proud of yourself, right? And throughout your journey where you are now, I mean, you've grown so much, and we're going to get into how you became the president. How proud of yourself are you as well? I think it's important for people to share that.
Well, if I'm honest, that's an uncomfortable question to answer.
I know.
I do struggle with confidence, which somebody may listen and go, well, you don't sound like her, but absolutely I do. And I know you've talked with many of your guests about leadership style. And if I'm honest, my leadership style is very different than many, particularly men. You think like Joe Gibbs is what I would call the alpha male, and many leaders, male or female, are just what I call alpha leaders. They walk in a room and you immediately go, they're in charge, and they like it. By the way, that's what they were wired to do. I am not that. I'm more of a reluctant leader, and so for me, it is hard to be proud of myself. I mean, yes, I am. maybe, and I appreciate you using that word. I mean, for me, it's more, I definitely feel very blessed. Like I'm not worthy. Like, again, there are people who work harder than me, who maybe are more faithful in many areas than me, that didn't have the same outcome of me. And that's not necessarily their fault. And so in many ways, I just feel like I have a duty to be a good steward of this role, because for whatever reason, when I talk about life being a book, part of my book was I got to get this role. And yes, did I work hard for it? I did. But again, a lot of people work hard and don't have the equal outcome that I have. So I feel very humbled by it. And I feel a responsibility. It's what drives me, is that this role isn't for me anymore. So yes, again, I guess I could say I'm proud of myself, but more than anything, I have a self-awareness that I have a duty in this role to, how can I be others focused? How can I use this role to do good, whatever that looks like, whether it's, again, breathing life into every interaction, encouraging the people around me. I get to be in the company of great leaders. Well, what am I doing? Am I doing that to pad my ego, or am I doing that to, equip and encourage them? And so in many ways, I can't believe that I got here. When I read my book, I guess you could say I was proud, but more than anything, just blessed, just like, wow, this really was a cool story. And, I'm grateful for it. But so I don't know. It's definitely an uncomfortable question to answer for me, because it's hard to say I'm proud of myself, if I'm honest.
No, and I know, and it's interesting. It's very interesting too, because change makers, what I have found is so many who have done such incredible work, and I've interviewed over 70, and almost all of them have said something very similar. And there's this imposter syndrome piece that true change makers seem to really feel. And that's what makes them so special, not the imposter syndrome, but the fact that they do it for the greater good of humanity, the work that they do. It isn't to feed their own. It is to do better and do good in the world.
Imposter syndrome is a great phrase. I'm glad you used it. I use it all the time. I mean, I was just at the Daytona 500, and at that race, all the C-level executives from our big partners come, Toyota, FedEx, and, we were in a particular reception, and I'm talking to some of the greatest leaders in America. And if I'm honest, I'm always thinking to myself, what in the world am I doing here? Or I'll have a one-on-one conversation, and I'm kind of looking over my shoulders going, are you talking to me? Are you really asking my opinion on this? And so it's hard to flip the switch from, I know it was a long time ago that I was the unpaid intern, but in my mind, I am often still the unpaid intern, trying to prove myself, feeling like I am more comfortable in meetings with people whose rank is lower than me, because I feel like I'm their peer, than I am with someone who is a president or a CEO, because I just feel intimidated being around them sometimes, because I don't feel like I'm the guy that they're supposed to be talking to.
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, first of all, we could speak for 3 hours, 4 hours, and it would feel like 20 minutes. This is one of those conversations. But you told me one time when you were in the boardroom and you're leading the meeting, and at some point there's silence because everybody wants to hear from you, and you're like, am I supposed to be the one giving direction here? Am I supposed to be the one talking? Like, I'm still, so, the humility that comes with that is pretty extraordinary. And so what I say about your leadership style is the folks who you lead, I think the vast majority of them feel this allegiance to you because of the humility. You're going to have some people who try to take advantage of the humility. They're going to take that as a weakness. But I think for the most part, folks will have this loyalty to you because you're like them. And so you're not the alpha male, but they want to please you the way you want to please other folks so much, so they'll go above and beyond for you.
Well, I appreciate that. I will say one of the unique things about my role is everyone here knows I've done almost every job in the front office. So that in and of itself, I do think earns you credibility, because I was able, we have an expert in PR who actually came through a PR background and came from the NFL, but he knows, hey, before we could afford having a PR person, I did that. And the person who's now a really good T-shirt person, they knew, well, you did this. So I can look them in the eye and say, hey, I did that. And so there is a degree of that. And I appreciate that. But again, that's not to say the alpha thing doesn't work, because we have one of those too. And he's up here, and I'm grateful for that, because there are meetings where I'm like, please, you go be the one. I think we would have killed each other by now if we were both that same profile, but we complement each other well. And so I think that's, again, good. There's actually a chapter in my book called Be a Complement, Not a Clone. And often people think I've got to be a clone in some corporate army and look like this, dress like this, talk like this to fit in. And the reason they're paying you is because there's only one you. You're unique. Let that uniqueness come out. Have a diversity of thought and opinion. And that is what makes a great company. Don't fall into that trap of, well, gosh, I've got to look and think like everybody else. And I think that's one of the things that served us well, is our, just looking at Coach and I and JD, all of us were we complemented each other a great deal and encouraged that difference in each other.
In yourself.
So I definitely want to touch on, because it's important. I know that, you lost a best friend, you lost JD, and you had to then take over his role, and you became the president of the organization. And I can't even imagine how that felt, because you've even brought it up. I've listened to you on other interviews and how difficult that was, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about that story and a day in the life of what being the president of your organization is like.
Yeah. Well, let's do remind me at the end, after the JD part, to talk about the day in the life, but so just again, real quick, I met JD in 7th grade, very unique. He was I would say as a peer, he was the peer I admired the most. I mean, it's very simple. He just was one of those guys that was just always knew the right answer to everything. Again, keep in mind, his dad was the coach of the local NFL team that happened to go to the Super Bowl every 3 years. He was the quarterback of the football team. He was great looking. He was the All-American guy, yet sort of the signature thing of JD was he would sit at different tables at the cafeteria and just say, hey, my name's JD. And they go, I know who you are. And because he taught me, he's taught me the power of influence. And so he was always that guy to me, that friend in every stage of life. And the interesting thing about my journey is I had honestly probably 20 years of my career where there was a lot of frustration. I keep a prayer journal. I try to spend time in the morning reading and having some prayer time, and I'll write my journal. And sometimes, if I'm honest, it was a vent session. I would vent about, I'm frustrated about this, or, God, what's going on in my life? And often it was, I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel, am I going to be the T-shirt guy forever? Am I going to be in this broom closet? I'm wasting my talents. No one appreciates me, blah, 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 things that we all say. And I don't get any credit for things. I'm in these big meetings, and then they go out and they deliver the message, and no one knows that I was in there, and maybe it was my idea. And hey, that bothers you sometimes. And so I had no idea that I was being prepared for a job that was never even in the realm of my possibility. You work for a small family business. You're not in the family. I was kind of as high as I was going to ever be. And then JD gets sick, which was JD had a very cruel neurological disease that, really deteriorated over a period of 5 years. And it was awful. And he's probably the toughest guy I know. And so you would never know it from him, never complained. He probably honestly the only person that I can tell you in their entire life, I never heard him complain once, ever, from childhood to ever. So it was really difficult. And when he couldn't perform his job anymore, Coach came to me and just said, listen, we need someone to take the role of president, and you're it. You're the only one that can do it. And it was kind of like this light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, again, going back to, if I had known 4 chapters ago that this was coming, I would have probably dealt with everything a little bit better, but it doesn't work like that. And now all of a sudden it made sense. Doesn't mean I liked it or I was comfortable. And, it's been 6+ years now. Look, and if I'm honest, there have been many journal entries where I've said, I wish I was still the T-shirt guy. You then go, man, life was a lot simpler back then. And I didn't know this was all that came with it. And so again, grateful for it, still uncomfortable about it. And so I try to bring the JD lens to every conversation, because we miss JD, we miss his wisdom. And so when there's a decision, I often think in terms of, hey, what would my buddy JD do? JD always put people before profits. There's a section of my book called Treat People Like a Soul and Not a Transaction. I got that from JD. Every person was a soul. It wasn't and you know what it's like to be treated like a transaction. It's, let me get through you quick to the next more important person, or clearly I need something from you, which is why I'm buttering you up so that I can ask you for something. And you never felt that way when you met with JD. And so I think of that in every interaction, whether it's someone in an elevator, whether it's the person sweeping the floor, whether it's the CEO. This person is a soul. They've got dreams and aspirations, and they've got a why in their life. And I want to encourage them in that. I don't want to just treat them as a transaction. So those are all things that I learned from JD that I'm trying to carry on now. And so thanks for asking about him. You asked about a day in the life. It's very unique. And one of the things I like about it is every day is very different. I'm a little ADD, so I'm kind of like a cat with a laser pen to begin with, that I'm jumping from one thing. If I'm honest, many days are kind of crisis management. You are I feel like a conflict negotiator many days, because you're resolving conflict. You're dealing with whether it's, again, something wrong with a sponsor, a driver did something, you've got an employee issue. It's any number of things, and it's just all hands on deck. It seems like all the time. There's also, as Q said, much of my job is just relational, and so you have to be intentional about that. So I have a list of who are the people that I have to be intentional with this week, to reach out and call, just to check in on them, both in my personal life, but both in work, sponsors, partners, people in the industry. I often feel like I'm an ambassador. That's my role, is that I'm representing our company to the different tracks, to the TV networks, to the league, to the other teams. And I am that ambassador that has to listen to what they're saying, bring it back to my group, try to get consensus, while at the same time managing conflict all the time. So I'm on the phone a lot. I'm in a lot of meetings. It's funny, I'm a very structured, scheduled person, and I work for a person who is not at all. He is, Joe is very reactive, and he wants everyone together. He's not a big fan of remote work, by the way. He likes everyone here. He likes all his people in a room together. So you have to leave margin. I have to leave margin in my schedule, because if I'm too hyper scheduled, I won't have time for the crisis or the fires or the things. And so something's usually getting moved or canceled because something comes up that at the beginning of my day, when I wrote out my list of priorities, by 10 o'clock, that shifts, or there's a new one that I hadn't contemplated. And you just got to be flexible. Again, you've got to, it's good to rely on other people. I really value the people. Hey, if you hire someone in an area, let them be the expert and let them give you their wisdom. So depending on the topic, I'm usually including other folks in these decisions. So yeah, a lot of moving around. We do travel quite a bit. We go to the races. I don't go to all 38 of them, but I go to enough. So it changes a lot. I will say I don't wake up and do the same thing every day. It often looks different, but the common thread is you're always dealing with people. You're definitely going to deal with some conflict on any given day. And so a lot of times it's hard to predict.
And you have, so Joe Gibbs Racing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you had 3 race cars at one point, yeah. And now you have 4, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, I mean, the breadth of you've increased by 1/3 the volume of work by adding a race car. And so the trust that must come from your office has to be at a high level in order to accelerate the conversations when there is a crisis, because now you have to deal with 1/3 more of those crises. How do you work through that with only 24 hours in a day? You have a beautiful family. You spend time with your family. So looking for balance. How do you work through all of that?
Well, again, great questions, Q. I'll start with, interestingly, we have actually seen NASCAR from every position, meaning at one point, we just had one team and one car, which is what you think of with a normal sports team is, hey, we all go, we compete, we come home. Then we moved to 2, then 3, and as you mentioned, now 4. So think of it this way. I have 3 boys, some of you listening may have multiple kids. It's like if your kids were all competing in the same event every week. As a parent, who do you root for? You know someone's going to lose, in our case, at least 3. So there's 40 cars competing every week. 4 of them belong to the same organization. And so as just by nature, you have 3 losers every week before you even show up. And so at the end of a race, do you go comfort the losers or do you go to victory lane to celebrate with the winner? You have one sponsor that's leaving angry and another sponsor that's really excited. Which one do you call first? How do you massage that? So to your point, it's very difficult. And hopefully over time, you've earned the right and you've built relationship that they understand. It's a lot. And you mentioned the family part, and I talk a lot in my book about work-life balance. Work-life balance never happens accidentally. It is probably the most intentional thing that I do and that I've had to do with kids. I go back to the early stage of my career when I was somewhat frustrated. I look back then, I feel like I was being protected because when my kids were younger, hey, I was busy here, but it wasn't as busy as I am now. I wouldn't trade that for the world. I would not want my job now when my kids were littler because I am more busy and I do more things at night and I'm getting calls more. So, but even in that stage of life, I had to be intentional. And I talk about as a planner, I used to keep an Excel spreadsheet and I would categorize things as have to do, could do, might do. And look, early in my career, when I didn't have kids, I did everything. I would go to there, and many jobs you can relate to this. There's probably something you could do every night, whether it's bringing work home to get ahead, whether it's going to a dinner with clients, whether it's take your pick. Some of those I had to do, and I tried to be strategic. And I would tell my wife, I'd tell the boys, hey, I might miss your thing tonight because this is something coach is counting on me. I have to go to this. But the next night, there might be something that, would that be good for my career advancement? Might be. Somebody else could do it, whatever, and I'd go, not doing it. I tried not to get caught up in the trap of I'm going to do everything and I'm going to at all costs. It wasn't at all costs. There had to be sacrifice on both sides. I actually use this phrase a lot. I call it cheating on work. And I say it because it's a dramatic word and I don't mean cheating in an unethical way, but everyone knows what it's like to have the things that are important to you cheated on by your work. And for me, hey, I signed up for a job that asked for that. And what does that look like? That looks like being at dinner with my wife and getting a call, or with my board, being at an event with my kids and I've got to walk out to take a phone call, or I've got to go to a dinner, or hey, I love going to church with my family and I gave up a lot of Sundays to go to church with this job because I signed up for it. Again, so it's not a complaining, but hey, work often is going to cheat on the things that matter the most to you. Conversely, there's sort of this odd thing that exists in our culture where it's unacceptable to cheat on work sometimes for the things that mean the most to you. Like you got to feel like I'm going to sneak out at 4 to go to my kids' baseball practice because people are going to think I'm a slacker, or take your pick. So I encourage my people, I do myself, cheat on work. Again, if you pick the right people, they're not going to take advantage of that. It's going to balance out. Usually it's going to balance out in work's favor. If you want to leave to go to don't miss those big events. Don't miss those important things that are important to you. And if you're single, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's something that you volunteer with, whatever it is for you, prioritize that and don't be afraid. But you have to be intentional with it. And I say this often, don't beat yourself up. There are stages of life where your work-life balance isn't going to be great. I use the example in my book. If you're in medical school or maybe, again, whatever, you're a new attorney working for, hey, Q, you went through that. There's just phases in your career where it's just going to stink. And work-life balance may look like, again, taking 20 minutes to go on a walk or whatever those things are, calling a friend when you're in a commute, somebody that's going to energize you. But being intentional with your schedule and finding balance is so important. And look, I argue that healthy, balanced employees who are cheating on work they're better employees. They're going to add more value when they're here than people who are just being grinded and burnt out all the time with no balance. It's a fact. I know it's true for me and I've seen it.
That's incredible. You're setting such an amazing example. And I totally believe exactly what you're saying. And I know Q does too, because he's shaking his head it's so important to nurture and empower them to feel like they can have downtime so that they can refuel.
And it's hard. Look, I'm saying it out loud, and there's probably people in my company who will listen to this and go, yeah, we don't do that. And it's hard. I mean, it is hard, and particularly different seasons. For us, it seems like our season is 365 days. Like there's never an off time, even over Christmas when we're closed for a week, there's all kinds of calls and things that are still happening. So again, I always say, don't beat yourself up. Be intentional about it. It is difficult, and it doesn't always look like I want it to look, but you've got to have that intention, and you've got to be strategic about it. It won't happen accidentally.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be closing down soon, but just kind of on that continuum, in sports, sports is glamorous to those who want to get into it. When you get into it, the mystique goes pretty quickly. There are a few things that have to be done in order to be successful in sports. It's not just about, like many companies, sales. Sales determines success, okay? Profit, that kind of thing. Yeah. With sports, it's about, sales. So you have to sell with sponsors. It's a big part of NASCAR, but winning.
Absolutely.
You have to win too. And then you have to have a culture that sustains that winning, so that people love to come to work and love to work hard, and they don't mind sacrificing. So you have to have, at a minimum, 3 areas of success in order to have great sustainability and success in sports, especially in NASCAR, because sales is a big part of what you do, but you have to win in order to sell. So my question is, how do you balance all 3 of those things in order to create a culture that is sustainable and allows you to expand? Because you've expanded from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 cars. I don't know if you go to 5. I don't know how that works, but if there is that prospect, there's a 5th team that might be coming at some point. Before you know it, you'll have 20 teams in a 40 car.
NASCAR limits you to 4, so we're stuck. We're at the maximum. So we're at the max.
Okay. Yeah. But how do you maintain that balance? And then thank you. As you answer that question, I want to say thank you for all you do, and thank you for participating in this. I know your time is stretched. This has been a true pleasure, Dave.
No, look, I'd love to continue talking as well. No, so that's a great question. Culture. So there's a couple things. I believe our culture here at JGR is a 3-legged stool. Honor God first and foremost, put people before profits, and relentlessly pursue winning. Those 3 things. And so I talk about, you have a corporate culture, and then every company has to have a mission. And I call it sort of, what's your North Star? What's your one question? For Joe Gibbs Racing, that is, does this make us go fast? That's the question that we ask before we make any capital purchase, before we hire anyone. And we have been relentless in our faithfulness to that one mission. Don't try to be all things to all people, because Joe felt like early on, if we want to be the best, if we want to recruit the best people, and we want to recruit the best sponsors and retain people, it starts with winning the most. If you lead the most laps and you win, everything else takes care of itself. So that's been our North Star. And again, within that, I talk about the corporate culture being made up of, honoring God, people before profits, and then that relentlessly pursue winning. That was easier to do when we had 15 people than we have 500, because you go from family to factory. And when you're a factory, it's very different to feel like you're a family. It just is. And it didn't happen overnight. It gradually happened. So eventually you look around and you go, who is that person? Look, if I walk through the shop, I don't know a lot of the names, and that bothers me. It's hard to. And so all that to say, it's not easy. I think we're all a reflection of our leader coach, who has tried. Again, it's never one big thing. It's 100 little things. What are 100 ways we can make people feel like this is a family? We care about your soul. We care about you before we do profits. And at the same time, since you're all professionals at your craft, you want to be successful. So we want you to feel like you're at a place that values winning, because you've been in pro sports, athletes want to be in a winning culture. They don't want just happy family fun time. They want to win. So doing both is difficult. One other ingredient that I will sprinkle in, again, we're all a reflection of our leader. It's very difficult to win in a pro sport without a leader that has a constant sense of urgency, meaning and a non-complacent sense of urgency. I want to give you one story that sort of illustrates, actually two real quick. So Coach wakes up and goes to bed thinking about going fast. It's all he thinks about. I tell the story in my book. There's an example. I got a call at 11 o'clock at night. Coach, by the way, never starts a phone call with, hey, is this a good time? Or are you eating? It's just, he goes right into it. He had an issue. He said, hey, can you gather the group to meet? Meaning drive into the office 11 o'clock at night. And I paused and I said, now, is whatever you want to go over still going to be kind of a thing like at 7 in the morning? Could we just gather everyone in the morning? And he stopped for a minute and he was like, yeah, okay, do that. Let's meet at 7 in the morning. Had I not said that, we were driving in at 11 o'clock. So there's this drive. We have a competition meeting every Monday. And what it is, all the drivers, crew chiefs, all the technical people meet to debrief about the race that just happened. We all get in a room. In 2019, we had our best season ever. We won 19 races. It's a NASCAR record. And one particular week, we finished first, second, and third. That never had happened before. And we did it 4 times that year. So special, magical year. We finished first, second, and third. We walk into the competition meeting. And look, I'm not expecting cake and balloons, but I thought people are going to be kind of upbeat. And it was, the meeting started off with, our pit stop stunk. We didn't do this well. We need to work on this week. And I'm kind of leaning over to the guy next to me going, did I watch the same race on Sunday? I thought we were first, second, and third. And the point was, we weren't, again, there was appropriate celebration at the track. It wasn't saying we can't celebrate but hey, we were in the middle of the season and there was this sense of urgency that doesn't matter, not good enough, got to get better, got to push. So in that comes a great deal of pressure, a great deal of stress. So all the elements of the culture that I talked about, how do you balance that? Again, it's difficult. It starts with your leader though. And so most of the teams that win have people at the top that share the same mission, that share the same values, that they view the culture the same way, they have that same North Star, and there is a relentless pursuit of it all the time. So I think it starts with Coach, and that's one of the ways, Q, I think we've been able to grow the way we have is because, it's this relentless pursuit of, hey, not wanting to disappoint our partners, not wanting to disappoint our people, wanting to continue to stay on top. And it's very difficult to do in pro sports, as you know.
Dave, I swear we could talk to you for hours. I could tell you that right now, and I hope you'll come back again, but I have to ask you the last question that I ask every single guest. This year, every year I change the question. And the question this year is, what is the footprint you're creating right now that you want to leave behind?
I appreciate that. I think about that every day. And I think one of the reasons I love Q is I know he does too. Again, you talked earlier about the why. Everything I do now, I'm thinking about not why. So it used to be getting a new sponsor or winning a race kind of was like, that floated my boat. I was like, that's awesome and whatever. Look, that is still important because I think we're called to be great at what we do. So again, I have a saying, nobody cares what you think if you stink. So you better be really good at what you do if you want to have impact. So all those things are important. But when I have a meeting with someone, when I'm interacting with an employee or an executive or a sponsor or a partner, how can I encourage them? How can I breathe life into that interaction? So for me, I want to leave a legacy that's lasting. I want us to be good stewards. We have a ministry department that has about 80 organizations around the world that we support. Most of them are faith-based. And that's the legacy we're going to leave as a race team. So our winning isn't just to get a trophy. Our winning is to give us a platform and resources to do things that actually will matter. And to tie this all up and to bring it full circle with our conversation, I had the privilege of speaking at JD's funeral. And if anyone wants to listen to it, you can go to jdgibbslegacy.org, and over 8 million people have watched his service. But if you want to look at a life well lived, and the interesting thing about JD's service is for an hour and a half, not one person mentioned one thing about what he did at work, not one person. Now, work was the platform by which he did all this other stuff. But they didn't say, man, he could negotiate a deal, or man, we won a lot of races because of JD. It was how he impacted people. It was the organizations, the relationships, the people. And so that is our vocation, is not for us. It is a platform to help others. And so the footprint I want to leave is, look, you know, at some point I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And I don't want, you know, I have some trophies and things behind me, but that is not my legacy. Those are going to get dusty somewhere. I hope there's people who are going to say, Dave made a difference in my life, or because Dave was president, JGR was able to do X, Y, or Z, and this made a difference in people's lives. And so I know that may be a cliche answer, but that's real. I mean, that's real. And again, I try to think about that all the time. And again, what's the example I'm being to my 3 boys? They're in business, and they're watching me, and they were since they were little. How does dad do business? When they're in the backseat of the car and I'm talking to somebody, what am I saying? Not only to them, but when I hang up the phone about them, they're listening, they're watching. And so that's the legacy that I'm leaving, is my family and the people that I'm hopefully influencing as a result of this job. And again, if you're listening and your job is in a cubicle looking at spreadsheets and you don't have a sphere of influence that's big, that's okay. You're going to influence, maybe it's one person every day. That's okay. Whoever is put in your sphere is that's your footprint, and that's the legacy that you have. Be great within that. And if your sphere gets increased, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So I would say that would be my answer to that. And I'm grateful that you asked that.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. Really, truly.
And then let me just say,
Yeah, please.
that one person, that person in the cubicle with spreadsheets is influencing, is not just one person.
Never.
It's their family,
Yep.
It's their neighborhood, it's their community, it might be the nation. You never 100%. Know who that person is.
And Q, I love that you said that. One of those people in that sphere, they may become a leader that looks, you know, maybe different than you're going to look because of your influence. And again, I have spiritual mentors that they're doing different things, but I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for them. So you're influencing other leaders, and you're having an exponential impact with every person that you touch. So that's a great point, Q.
You can walk into a store, you know, a coffee shop, and say thank you to the person, smile at them, ask them how their day is. And you may be the only person who asked them that, and you could have changed their entire day.
You could have saved their life, because there's people dealing with all kinds of things we can't imagine that may have just needed to know there is some good in this world. There's a person who smiled and noticed me. You have no idea. And conversely, that person you're honking your horn at, or you're being impatient with in the drive-through line, that they don't need that, and they don't deserve that. And so you've got to think through that with every interaction that you have. I'm saying that to myself, by the way, because I'm certainly not above that. That's for sure. So.
Oh, no, well, we're all learning. We're all on this journey to learn, right?
Yeah.
Every single day. So Q, thank you so much for being a co-host today. I always love and enjoy doing this with you. And then Dave, it has just been such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today.
Jody, thanks. And thanks for, again, what you're doing. I love your podcast, and I'm grateful to be on it. And Q, always a pleasure. Let's do lunch soon. We're overdue. I'm buying this time. You got the last one.
That's now on the podcast. Just
all right, yeah, we have witnesses.
Exactly. We have witnesses. So I'm going to end the podcast, as I always do, with my mantra, which is, today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small or large step are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Again, thank you to Q and Dave for being amazing guest and co-host. And I hope everybody has a fabulous week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.